For professional advice with a personal touch, consult FL Fuller Landau, Chartered Professional Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
7:06 on today's Entrepreneur. Welcome to the program, a program about the entrepreneurial spirit that drives Quebec business. My name is Dan Delmar, along with FL Fuller Landau's Josh Miller. Good evening, Josh.
Hello, Dan.
And it's very sad. It's our last show of the season, actually.
Try not to shed too many tears. Nobody will see it anyways.
We're going to come back in the fall after Labor Day, but this is typically when we take our summer hiatus. And it's been a really great season, I have to say. And we're ending it on a big note with a company that is really going global, based right here in Montreal. They are the darling of both the tech and fashion scenes here in Montreal, and the tech fashion scenes.
So many times how many times have we spoken about the online versus bricks and mortar stores?
Yeah.
How many times have we actually mentioned Frank and Oak as an example? And we're going to hear their story tonight, where they really only started out online. They're now bricks and mortar, but they have 2.5 million members on their online platform. So quite a story in such a short period of time, because I believe it's only been about 4 years.
So we'll have Ethan Song of Frank and Oak on the program this evening, so stay tuned for that. But first, let's do our usual entrepreneurial chat of the evening, and let's start with C2 actually, because I went last week. I checked out a lot of events there. Very interesting business conference. A lot of companies from around the world really come to Montreal to exchange ideas, and more importantly, to sort of chat with our creatives. I mean, Montreal is known as a creative hub. And from what I saw a lot of people from multinationals, Americans coming into town and really getting inspired by our creatives and our artists here.
And I think that's the thing, if you can go and you can get inspired by a snippet here or there, and you can take and you do something with it in your business, that's great. But other than that, because I saw the lineup, I didn't attend this year's event. I did get some feedbacks from some of my friends and colleagues and clients, and I must say they sounded fairly underwhelmed. A lot of big names, again, great snippets, the 10 minutes here, the 5 minutes there, the 15 minutes there. But what concrete comes out of it, really, that's what left a question mark in some people's heads. And I think with any conference, any trade show, you're going to get out of it only what you put into it. So if you take the time and you go, certainly from a networking standpoint, there's a lot of people there, as long as they take the time to talk to you. I think it's great. The question is, what are you bringing into it? It's the garbage in, garbage out. If you go and you don't spend the time and effort and energy, then you won't really get anything out of it. And certainly from a C2 event where there's big names and big experiences, you really got to delve in, because I don't know if you're going to get to all the big names and big experiences if you're a little entrepreneur. And if you can, great. And if you can't, at least take that snippet. But if you're not even going to take that snippet, then why waste your time? Because it's not a free event, Dan. I mean, it might be for some journalists and some lucky invitees, but the reality is it's $3,500-4,000 to attend this event. Not cheap.
It's a big investment, and I think it's only catered to a really narrow group of people who would be here in Montreal. So it's people, I think, who really are at the level of Frank and Oak, where they can network at a multinational level. It's not a local conference for sure. I don't think anyone is going to bring their startup from 0 to 100 at C2. These are for, I think, really developed ideas, developed businesses, people that have experience and who want to take things to the next level. And from what I was seeing there, I was seeing mostly people from outside Quebec, a lot of Americans, a lot of Chinese business people as well, a lot of people from India. So in that sense, I think a lot of people who are sort of in that very corporate multinational environment don't get out and let loose a little, once in a while. And I think C2 for them is that opportunity to let loose and be inspired by the kind of lifestyle that we take for granted here in Montreal.
There's no question Montreal is a great attraction point, and we offer a whole lot of things, not just surrounding the C2 event. But you're right, if you're going to come from out of town and you're going to be that player, so to speak, I think it could be a great event. From the people that I spoke with, the locals here, it's funny how they didn't get much out of it. Then again, they didn't pay for it either. Yeah. So I wonder how seriously they take it. And the flip side of that coin is I wonder how many seats they're filling just to make sure it's a big renowned event. So somebody says, hey, I attended an event with thousands of people.
Hey, I got a couple of accounts out of it, so I'm not going to complain. For us, it was a positive networking experience for sure. And some talks are better than others. I can only hear David Suzuki talk about his stuff 1,000 times before I get kind of bored. But Andy Nillman was great. He's always great to inspire people. I was really blown away by Michel Laprise from Cirque du Soleil, actually, and I wrote about that in my column today in the Gazette because to me that's a great example of a Quebecer who is really creative, who has a creative vision, very artistic creative vision, but then can also translate it into dollars. And that's sort of was my point in the column today was it's great to be creative, great to have all these ideas and have joie de vivre and all that, but time to make some money eventually, and the Cirque knows how to do that.
And Dan, you went there with a purpose, and you went there and you put in your time and your effort, and you made sure you spoke with people and you networked, so you're going to get something out of it. That's what with any trade show, with any conference, as I said earlier, if you're going to go and you're going to make the effort and you're going to put some time and energy into it and you're going to treat it like a job and not just a fun social point, although that's good too, then you'll get something out of it. But if you don't, then I don't know how much time should be wasted.
You also wanted to mention this piece about C2, why that was in Les Affaires, why C2 should be C3 MTL.
And I guess the question it's that next generation. It's what happens next. It's the been there, done that kind of, C2 has been around for a little while. Is it time for the next phase? It's kind of, 3.0, not the 2.0. And really that, because there was your article, you had a really great experience. In Les Affaires, it was okay, but it wasn't really resounding great. And I think the article was really about it can be a great event. It's a great city. Has such great potential, but it's a been there, done that kind of thing. What can they do to take it to the next level? And I think that's kind of a lesson in any event that you go on. You can't keep doing the same thing over and over again. It will get stale.
Airbnb, they are reacting to a Quebec law that's going to regulate home sharing, basically, which is what Airbnb does.
Well, and that's really, there is a hotel tax. There's this 3.5%, tax, and they're really, if you're going to have your place rented out enough times during the year, then you're supposed to register and you're supposed to charge that tax. And I think it's more. The reason I we kind of bring up the article is more about this sharing economy, and it's more about how, we listen to Uber and, if they don't fall into line, if they don't start getting licenses, well, they'll be out. Airbnb, this article was, well, you have to subscribe to the hotel industry taxes. Who knows what's next, but there's certainly other aspects that this sharing community, if they don't comply with the laws that are around, there's going to be too many butting heads, and as we all know, the governments are broke, so they need their funds as much as anybody else, and they're going to want to enforce all these rules and these laws and these taxes that they've had set up in place for many, many years. And then, of course, is all the competition that's already paying for it anyways and feel that it's unfair. So I feel that this sharing community, they're going to have to come up. They're going to have to start complying a little bit more with the laws that are already at hand, because those laws are not changing so quickly.
And, this whole sharing economy stuff in Quebec, not really working out too well in some cases because we're used to monopolies that we enjoy, I think, more than sharing. And
that is something we do love in our lovely Quebec society.
You also wanted to mention this piece from Report on Business, how to use an influencer to boost your brand.
And Dan, I would kind of pose the question back to you. The social media, you want followers. Sometimes companies don't have as many followers as they'd like, but if they get an influencer that has thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of followers, and that influencer gets to write something about your product, your service, what have you, that can be a big boost for business. But I'm talking too much. You know more about this than I do.
No, I agree. And as I'm a mascot for Provocateur, I encourage my clients to be mascots for their businesses as well. Because for me, it's and you can go out and get a spokesperson or something like that, and that's a good way of marketing yourself. But I also try to create these influencers from scratch. So I like to take someone in the business, an owner, co-owner, manager, and try to have them become the spokesperson or the mascot for their brand. And no one knows the business better than those who are working in it day in and day out, right? So that's part of what I do and what I encourage as well. Every business needs a spokesperson. So you have to develop that person, probably the founder of the business or the majority owner in most cases, and have them go out there and evangelize for your brand, and that's something that could yield results.
But if you find an influencer online, a social media influencer, might be a little cheaper than finding that celebrity spokesperson that you might have to pay for certain commercials. So there's also a bang for the buck out there.
Coming up, we'll talk to Ethan Song of Frank and Oak.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult FL Fuller Landau, Chartered Professional Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
7:20 on today's Entrepreneur, inspiring stories from outstanding business people. Dan Delmar and FL Fuller Landau's Josh Miller with you. And this evening, we welcome Ethan Song of Frank and Oak into the studio. Ethan, welcome.
Thank you.
So, Josh, this is an interesting story because we actually profiled Frank and Oak before they were Frank and Oak.
Before they were Frank and Oak, it was a few years ago when they were ModaSuite.
And so now here we go. You guys have really taken off. So, Ethan, first, tell us a little bit about Frank and Oak, how you started, and how you sort of, took it to the next level with after ModaSuite.
Yeah, so we started Frank and Oak in 2012. So it's been 4.5 years now that company is on the market. And the idea, there's two things that came together. The first thing is that we saw that there was no brands out there that were created for millennial guys that were more entrepreneurial, creative, wanted a good product, but also wanted a product that was accessible. And then on the other side, we realized, well, if we're dealing with men, men don't like to shop as much. They don't know what to buy. They often need the assistance of their girlfriend. And we said, well, can we create a brand where the product and the experience comes together and it makes you live a better life and dress better?
So was it only about apparel, or did you also add accessories at the same time?
Well, I think the thing that's interesting about Frank and Oak is that it's really about the experience and the brand that we created. So we first started with dress shirts and accessories, and then since then, now we have a full collection of footwear, we have denim. We're really here to dress you and make your life better.
Now, what was your background? Like, what were you doing before Frank and Oak?
Yeah, it's really funny because I can't say that, my dream was to run a consumer or fashion brand. I actually studied in both film as well as computer and software engineering while going to university in Vancouver at UBC, actually. And I was very creative. I was always into technology, always into cool consumer stuff. And after I graduated, I really wanted to start a business, but I didn't feel like I had nor the dollars or the money to do so, nor the confidence. So I started an internship at Deloitte in consulting, which turned into a job. And there, I work with a lot of clients at a global level, and that gave me a lot of business knowledge. So I really combined my business knowledge with my more creative and technology-oriented skills to create Frank and Oak. And in some ways, Steve Jobs, the great Steve Jobs, once said that you cannot connect dots forward because the world is moving so fast. You can only connect them backwards. So when I'm connecting the dots, I realize, well, you know what? I'm actually quite well equipped for my job today.
No, and I think your background history of the computer side, because you did start strictly online, and then you kind of went to the retail locations, and it'll be kind of interesting to hear what that aha moment or that trigger point says, you know what, we really got to go from that online to bricks and mortar. When we come back from the break, we'll explore that a little further.
Ethan Song with us from Frank and Oak this evening on today's Entrepreneur.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult FL Fuller Landau, Chartered Professional Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
7:25 on today's Entrepreneur. We're joined by Ethan Song of Frank and Oak. And Josh, a recurring theme on this program has been retail, the troubles in retail, online versus brick and mortar stores. And here we have a brave example of a company that went from online to bricks and mortar.
Now, maybe, Ethan, you can take us at the very beginning. You said you started Frank and Oak 2012. You were strictly online at that point, correct? How many years before you decided to get to a physical retail location?
Yeah, so we started testing the physical side of the business about 2 years ago. So I would say 3 years in is when we looked at that option. But if we go back to the beginning, our goal was to create a brand for millennial guys and to help guys dress better, right? So I didn't talk about channels. I only talked about our vision as a business. But it just happened that you can do that a lot more effectively online using data, using digital channels, using content, and that's why we start online. So the big question that I guess you guys are asking me is, well, why
At what point did you say, you know what, enough with the online, or we have, we hit a certain, I won't say saturation point because it's tough to do, but at some point you said, well, we're building this brand. How can we enhance it further? Is there something beyond the online marketplace that we've created?
Yeah, so I mean, like my position on that is that we've grown tremendously, in the e-commerce space. Like we were in the Deloitte Fast 50 #1 last year as the fastest growing technology company in Canada, and online is still growing very fast, both in the U.S. and Canada. We just opened to 40 countries globally, so it's not one or the other. That's the thing, right? It's more being able to effectively, basically create an experience that's engaging for customers. And we just found that, as an example, a big portion of our sales comes from mobile, that physical spaces are actually really powerful in terms of creating deep relationship with customers. And as a brand and retailer, relationships are extremely valuable.
We've often spoken on the program with past retailers and talking about the why, the consumer and why they really need to go into the store. It's not just about the product, it is about the experience. So when you're taking your online experience that you created for these millennial guys and you're turning it into a physical location, what is the thought process? What was that first design concept of a store so that you can, I don't want to say recreate, but have that concept flow really well into the community of Franken-Oak?
I mean, I think the first thing, talking about the entire industry, I do think that it's sometimes a lot of people find that, it's e-commerce that's disrupting, traditional retail. I actually think that it's technology that's disrupting everything, right? Including physical stores. Mm-hmm. Physical spaces are places where people interact. A store doesn't have to be always the same. And I think technology is also changing that. And it's also changing people's expectation of the kind of experiences they want to have in a space. So when it comes to online, my philosophy is always like, you want to make it simple, you want to make it efficient. Whereas like when it comes to retail, create a rich experience, engage with your customer, add a human touch, and that's what makes it special.
So is that where your store might stand out differently? Is like, how do you feel your store, Franken-Oak, uniquely stands out compared to some of your competition?
Oh, I mean, I think our store stands out in many different ways, but in ways that align with our core vision. One, we use our stores as media, right? So we have a lot of in-store events. We present the product there. We actually lend our spaces to other communities to hold their events there. So it's almost a physical space where a lot of community can come together. But the other component is that we have a strong focus on personal service. You can take appointments via your mobile phone. We will actually service you, and we have like trained specialists that are there to help you. And in some ways, I always say, like it's a little bit like the Apple Store, where like the service component is almost more important, and we're really there to help you.
And I think we've been talking about this for quite a while, Dan, about the why going into a store and how do you draw people in, because it's not just about foot traffic. It's there needs to be that reason to go in. There needs to be that comfort level, that security, that service level that certainly Franken-Oak is bringing to the table. And when we come back, I'm sure we'll talk about more about further marketing and branding as they expanded their line greatly from just the shirts to now a whole bunch of other products.
More with Ethan Song of Franken-Oak on the way, plus Ernie Furt from Fuller Landau joins us to talk about online sales and taxes.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult FL Fuller Landau, Chartered Professional Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
7:36 on Today's Entrepreneur, a program about the entrepreneurial spirit that drives Quebec business. My name is Dan Delmar, along with FL Fuller Landau's Josh Miller on our season finale, Josh, back in the fall in September. And this evening we're chatting with Ethan Song of Franken-Oak. Coming up, we'll talk to Ernie Furt from FL about online sales and taxes. Of course, Franken-Oak is an online retailer who recently opened up a brick-and-mortar location here in Montreal. Ethan, you were saying earlier how you were named by Deloitte as one of the fastest growing tech company in 2015. Tell us about the tech behind Franken-Oak, because on the surface, I mean, you're selling clothes, but there must be some really complicated technology that goes into your website, and obviously you can't reveal too much, but what can you tell us about the tech behind Franken-Oak?
Yeah, I mean, I think the main thing, about Franken-Oak is really around the integration of the omni-channel experience, right? So if we go back to what I was talking about earlier on, which is what we want to provide advice, we want to help you shop. There's a huge part of our business. It's all about recommendation. It's all about data. And it's about helping you find the products that are right for you. So part of that service is automated, part of that service is human driven, but you need that platform in order to do that. And now we've brought it across both online, mobile, and in store, so that there's an infrastructure that's there to support that as well.
So the concept of the Internet of Things, big data, capturing trends of your buyers, that's something that's also these algorithms that are built in as well. You use these to assist your members to for the next purchase?
Oh, absolutely. I think that there's a big part of the data, that you get, or the surveying that we do, because sometimes it's not just data, right? We actually ask our customer, like, what are your tastes? What are the brands you're buying from? That constant optimization of your business should also help the customer experience. As I said before, ultimately, it's all about making better recommendations. In the case of shopping, if you think about it, you have access to millions of products online, but what are the right ones for you? That matters a lot to our customers.
So you must know pretty quickly if you have a hit or even a flop based on the number of clicks, for example.
You mean in terms of products?
Yeah.
Well, I think that, like, I'll give you guys an example of a hit that was kind of almost like we didn't know that was going to be a hit. Well, we do extremely well with tall size products. And that's something that I don't think we could have been able to discover in the stores. But online, we just realized that looking at both what the customer is buying, what they're asking for, that there was a huge market, especially in the US, for tall size shirts, as an example. And that actually there were also skinny tall guys that were an underserved market. So based on the data, based on the product machine, we're able to get that out really quickly and optimize that business. I think that in the traditional way, it would have taken 2 or 3 years just even to know.
It's just my demographic, Dan, tall and skinny. What about flops? I mean, do you get instant feedback that way if you're putting something out? Maybe you can kind of explain.
Yeah,
that.
absolutely. I think that when it comes to consumer product, especially when you want to create a product that's exciting, a product that will, get people going about what they're passionate about, you have to take certain calculated risks. You can't just do what everyone else is doing. Otherwise, you're not leading in the market. So not every product works. But I think what's interesting is that, Frank & Oak does 12 collections a year. There's one new collection every single month. It allows us to basically, well, if it doesn't work, well, we can even it out. We can, remove that product, have new products replacing it. So you're always learning, always optimizing in the way that, like, flops just become part of the business. They become part of the calculated risk you have to take.
Now, you keep mentioning you're going back to, giving great service, all about the customer service experience. This requires a good team around you. A good team around you today. How many employees are you today about?
So in terms of like full-time employees, we're probably around like 115.
And 4 years ago, you were 1, 2, 3, 4, not too many.
Yeah, we were like 5.
So you grew pretty quickly, going from 0 to 100 employees in a little over 4 years. How did you manage that growth?
Well, I would say that it's a really good point. I think that, a lot of times we like to talk about the product, but really the team and the culture is what makes the product. And I always tell people, like, you can have good marketing today and good product today, but if you're not the right team, you're not going to be perform next year. So I think that a big part is hiring. Like, I think you need to define what you stand for and like what your company culture is, and make sure that you hire not just for skills, but also for culture.
So when you're doing your hiring process, you're looking at character, you're looking at attitude, you're looking at the fit for the team.
Yeah, and in most cases, a lot of things that we're doing are new to us, and they're probably new to the market as well. So it's very hard to find someone that has done it before. But you find someone that comes with the right set of skills, but also has that drive. And I think that's almost the most important thing at Frank & Oak, is that, like, you don't just want to come and like cruise along. You actually want to make an impact both in our company and our industry. I think those are the types of people that we like to work with.
So have you gone, there had to be a stage where you were going from really dealing or working with your team on an informal basis to kind of creating little formal rules and policies now that you've grown to such a number. Was that a difficult transition?
Yeah, I think it's something that needs to be managed for sure, because when you're a small company, everyone is kind of like family, like the relationships are loose. There's no hierarchy at all, and everyone kind of does it together. But over time, just like in a sports team, it's not efficient, actually. You do need structure. You do need people to have specific roles to play. I would say, once again, I think you do it gradually. I think that you need to remind yourself what you stand for, and you don't want structure to get in the way. But ultimately, just like culture, you do have to document it. So that's somewhere you do have to put it on paper, and you have to like message that clearly. And I would say that most employees actually appreciate that, because I think it comes to a point people want to know the rules of the game. They want to know like where they stand and how things work, and then perform within that context.
Certainly, and a lot of entrepreneurs talk about onboarding. When your team is first starting off and getting them on the right foot. So I don't know if you have a particular onboarding program that you've created or developed, or it's really that culture that just permeates.
No, I think onboarding is extremely important, and we actually do quite a bit of onboarding just for culture. I think a lot of people, do onboarding for skills or for specific like HR, let's say, tasks. We get our people to spend a lot of time together early on so that they get an understanding of the different people and the roles that they play. But I would say that almost the most important thing, other than hiring in a fast growth company, is the development of your employees, because 99% of the chances are that the roles and responsibilities of the employee will be different in a year from they are today. And you want to scale your people, you want to keep your people, you want your people to learn. So you want to make sure that you actually train them and invest in them from day one.
Ethan, I know it's radio and nobody can really see, but you're a young guy, just like they can see that I'm tall and skinny. Fits perfectly in your clothing. As you were, even whether it was before Frank and Oak or during, how about mentors or advisors? Or have they been important to you? Have you've been lucky enough to surround yourself with the right people?
Yeah, I would say that, Frank and Oak is a result of the entrepreneurial ecosystem here in Montreal. So, we couldn't have done this just on our own. There's a lot of people that believed in us and that supported us. A lot of people that we also had to convince to believe in us. So it was never that simple, but definitely like from very early on, whether it's, someone like Martin Luc Archambault, who like always quotes us because he's on the Dragon's Den now, or like the guys from like Real Ventures that supported us from the beginning. I do think that there's an ecosystem that was created in Montreal with both entrepreneurial mentors as well as communities that can support, so other founders that can support you. And I would say that now that we've been doing this for a few years, like I myself and my co-founder Isham, we actually spend the time to also mentor younger startups than us, because we understand that it's all part of supporting one another. It's part of that fact that you don't want to be successful and have everyone else not successful. We can all be successful as a community, as a society.
And community give back is huge. Listen, if you're part of a community and everybody's putting in and following your lead, giving back to that community is also huge. I mean, we talk about corporate social responsibility all the time. So it's great to hear that you're part of that as well. What a great story. I wish we can continue further, but we're coming up to our next break, and Ernie Furt afterwards.
Ernie's going to talk about online sales and taxes. He's, of course, tax partner at FL.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult FL Fuller Landau, Chartered Professional Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
Inspiring stories from outstanding business people. Dan Delmar and FL Fuller Landau's Josh Miller with you for the season finale of Today's Entrepreneur. And we're joined by Ethan Song of Frank and Oak. He's coming up with his one piece of advice for today's entrepreneur in a few minutes. But first, Ernie Furt is here, tax partner at FL, to talk about online sales and taxes. And no, just because you sell online does not mean that you don't have to pay taxes.
Well, the reality is, if you're selling online, people are buying from all over the world. The question is, even if you're located in Montreal, are you still responsible for any taxes that are around the world? And so we'll turn to Ernie, and certainly it's the U.S. is that's our closest trading partner and our probably biggest clientele, and lots of fun because of all the states that are out there. What are your first thoughts that come to mind when we're talking about online sales?
Well, if you're selling online to the United States, it's really not a big deal if you sell into 5 states. If you sell into Alaska, Delaware, New Hampshire, Montana, or Oregon, there's no sales tax, so it's not an issue. Okay, so but
you really got to be targeted to those.
You
areas.
Really have to be targeted. Now, if you take all those states and you add the population together, they're not going to make New York or California. Okay, in terms of size. Now, there's other states that are a little bit more difficult to do business in, and they want their pound of flesh with respect to sales tax. And it's kind of a quagmire out there because there's different rules for different states. And each state has their nexus rules, which is a connection with the state. And there's certain states to watch out for. Namely, California, Texas, New York, Illinois, Pennsylvania, New Jersey. Certain people in New Jersey, you can walk through New Jersey, take your own truck through New Jersey, and boom, you have sales tax nexus.
But that means people have to track where they're actually making their sales.
Well, people track where they're making their sales. You take your product, you sell it. It has to be delivered somehow. So if it's going to be delivered somehow, people know that it's getting there. So people get Nexus questionnaires out of the state of Pennsylvania, for example, when they ship stuff via common carrier to Pennsylvania. They know what's coming in, and they'll send you a questionnaire, and you have to be very careful how you fill out those questionnaires. Canada's a little bit easier because we have this GST and HST across the country. And, if you don't want to deal with provincial sales tax, for most part, you don't have to, except, if you can sell to Alberta, there is no provincial sales tax. You may have issues with respect to provincial sales tax in Saskatchewan, in Manitoba, and in British Columbia. But aside from that, there's no issue.
So what about, you only have a physical establishment here in Montreal. You don't have a physical establishment anywhere else, or what some people will term a permanent establishment. How does that come into play? Does it not matter at all anymore?
In terms of permanent establishment works for taxation, for income taxation, not for sales tax. Sales tax, it's based on point of delivery for goods. So I'm selling something to Ontario. I deliver it to Ontario. Regardless of who I bill for it, I have to charge HST in Ontario. So that's the issue. And they did a few years back. When the HST came in big time in Ontario, they revamped all of the place of supply rules in Canada, so it's consistent. And the beauty about the Canadian system is it is consistent rules all the way through.
So now, when you're talking about the sales tax, is it here in Canada? I mean, we self-report. You have your GST, QST, HST, and you're sending it to the government. In the U.S., is there a question of registering also? Is it self-reporting?
Well, there's registration. Yes, if you have the Nexus and you're required to register, there's registration. But in addition, there is a mechanism for self-reporting, because on each state income tax return, there's a place called for use tax. So if you buy stuff from out of state and you don't pay your local sales tax on that, you can actually self-assess and indicate that amount on your state tax return and pay that. And a lot of people who are in government, public office, things like that, will fill in that line. Some people who are in public accounting firms that I've spoken to in the U.S. also fill in that line because they have that duty to do so.
Now, we've been talking about products, and it's easy to figure out where a product gets delivered to because there's a physical location. What if you're selling a service or a membership like Frank and Oak, in certain areas? Is that membership is pretty intangible. It's in the air. And if somebody in the States is subscribing to that membership, is there also a sales tax implication?
In terms of the U.S., they basically deal with a goods tax. And certain states have carved out the service portion and are trying to tax the service portion. But this kind of stuff with respect to memberships, they really haven't done much on in the U.S. But little by little, as the states need more money, they look to add in items into the sales tax base, and that's what they're doing.
And certainly, listen, here in Quebec, I mean, they look, of course, to tax everything the government's broke. So when you're selling those services, those memberships, they want the geolocation software. They want to know where you're selling to, because otherwise they'll think, hey, everything's sold here in Quebec. You better have charged and collected your GST and your QST, because we don't believe that it was bought south of the border. So I wonder how much that's going to play out, not only the rest of Canada and the U.S., but throughout the world.
Eventually, we're going to move towards a global system. The U.S. has to come on board first, because they have a project in the States that's been around for forever. And I think the last update was basically in 2012, called the Streamlined Sales Tax Project, where what they want to do is try to streamline the sales tax rules between the states. So the rules are exactly the same. If I sell you a piece of merchandise and you deliver it in a spot, that's the rule. If I sell you a service, we have special rules for services. So, but each state looks at it and says, okay, well, these are the carve-outs that I want. And we don't want to tax children's clothing. We don't want to tax shoes. We don't want to tax feminine hygiene products, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of carve-outs, and people don't agree on the carve-outs, so what would you have anarchy again?
Ethan Song from Frank and Oak gives his one piece of advice for today's entrepreneur to wrap up the season.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult FL Fuller Landau, Chartered Professional Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
And coming to the end of the show and the end of the season on today's Entrepreneur. So let's thank Ernie Furt, tax partner at FL, for his insights on all things taxes and online. Thanks, Ernie, and have a great summer.
Thank you. You too.
And Ethan Song from Frank and Oak. We've been talking about you guys and about your growth a lot over the past couple of seasons. So, Ethan, your one piece of advice?
So, Ethan, what would be your one piece of advice for today's entrepreneur?
Yeah, so my piece of advice is pretty simple. It's one word: launch. Just whatever idea, whatever dream, whatever business you have, just launch it, and then you'll learn a tons and you'll make it better. I hear tons of entrepreneurs that talk to me about ideas and how they're working on this extensive business plan. Mark Zuckerberg, when he launched Facebook, he didn't work on a business plan, and look at where he is at today. So whatever you have, just put it out there and you'll be on your way.
And Dan, the takeaway from this show, even before we get to the whole end of the season wrap up, is there's a vision. Entrepreneurs have a vision. You can hear that Ethan at one point and his partner had a vision, and they executed and they took it out. But it was that vision and kept them on track to do that.
Ethan Song of Frank and Oak, thanks so much for stopping by, and it's great to see some local talent getting so far internationally. So best of luck to you guys.
Thank you, guys.
And Josh, that's it for the season. We're back probably around Labor Day, after Labor Day, on today's Entrepreneur.
After Labor Day, we're going to have a whole new lineup of entrepreneurs, lots of great stories, lots of great one pieces of advice for today's entrepreneur.
Have a great summer, Josh. Thanks for joining us here on CJAD. The Exchange with Sophie Durocher and Lise Ravery coming up next.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult FL Fuller Landau, Chartered Professional Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.